YouTube, Valley Girl 5678 here. If you haven't already noticed, we do have a bit of a change of scenery. As it's giving home for the holidays, Valley Girl 5678 is in the valley. And that's all cute and fun, but what we are really here today to do is go through my top 20 albums of 2023. Yes, it is part 2 of List Week, Valley Girl 5678 edition. As I mentioned in my top 30 songs of 2023 video, this was a pretty good year for music. So just like in my top 30 songs video, I will be going through my top 20 albums of the year from 20 to 1. But I of course have 5 honorable mentions because it wouldn't be a list of 20 albums without an extra 5. My honorable mentions are in no particular order, starting with I Don't Want You Anymore from Cherry Glazerr. As I mentioned in my top 30 songs video, the most impressive thing to me about Cherry Glazerr is her ability to take grunge and metal rock aesthetics and kind of translate them for the modern age. And this album is a great example of that. Next on my honorable mentions list is Wall Socket from Underscores. I just became in the know of Underscores this year thanks to one of my subscribers, Yuria, shout out, and I was absolutely in for a wild ride. Similarly to Cherry Glazerr, Underscores utilizes grunge and metal rock aesthetics, but instead of just translating them for the modern age, she mixes them with a plethora of other sonic stylings, whether it's modern stuff like hyperpop or more 90s alternative type stuff. Jane, do you want to come in? You can come in. Yeah, come on in. Come on. You can come in. Come on in. You make a decision. On this album, Underscores creates a musical stew of Gen Z fan rage that is just as interesting to listen to as it is cathartic. Next on my honorable mentions list is All of This Will End from Indigo D'Souza. Indigo D'Souza is one of my favorite indie rock artists on the scene right now. The projects she's put out in the last 5 years have just continued to impress me with their themes, overall sonic vibes, and timeliness almost through an antique or vintage aesthetic lens. You can tell Indigo makes music from their heart and is utilizing not just their current life experiences, but their ancestral experiences that live within them to create music that is timely in a timeless way. My next honorable mention is Yard from Slow Pulp. Slow Pulp is one of my other favorite artists making indie alt music right now. This album is titled perfectly. This entire project feels like a dewy, semi-cloudy day sitting in someone's backyard, exchanging stories and personal lore. This album feels like a breath of fresh air. And last on my honorable mentions list is Angels, Sex, Paranoia from Christine and the Queens. Now this project, album, whatever you want to call it, is an hour-and-a-half pop rock opera. If it wasn't an hour and a half long, it probably would be on the actual list. What's really impressive about this album is, to be honest, there's not a lot that I would even cut. It's just an experimental synth, pop, and rock beast, and I definitely recommend it for the next time you have an hour and a half to kill. It will make you cry, it will make you pop your pussy, and it will absolutely make you question your relationship with gender. It's a very impressive body of work for sure. Okay, we have made it to the actual list now. Coming in at number 20, we have Honey from Samia. This album came out in January of this year, I believe, and I'm not gonna lie, when I listened to this album, I really enjoyed it, but since it came out so early in the year, I felt like other releases as the year went on were going to kind of knock it down out of the list, but I was honestly wrong. This thing really holds up. It really showcases how special and unique Samia is as an artist. The themes on this album are full of specifics from Samia's life, yet are honestly at the same time super relatable. I think it's really easy if you are a girl making music in the indie genre to fall into very common trends of the genre as of current, and I think Samia does a really great job at staying away from that and making music that is truly unique to her, and that not only continues with this album, but it's solidified with this album. Coming in at number 19, we have With a Hammer from Yeji. I've been a fan of Yeji since her 2020 album, and I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting some more hard-hitting vibes from this project. I was absolutely not disappointed with the softness that the album ended up having. The themes on this album are quite revolutionary. What's really impressive about this album is that just when it seems like it's starting to lose some momentum, as you go further and further down the track list, it picks up right at the perfect moment with 3 songs in a row with features that really showcase just how versatile Yeji is as an artist. Coming in at number 18, we have 10,000 Gex from 100 Gex. I can't with them at this point. They're too silly. Just like Yeji's album, there are absolutely some revolutionary sentiments on this album, but they are done in ways by Lorelez and Dylan Brady that do not take themselves too seriously. I mean, Frog on the Floor is probably the most ridiculous philosophical piece of music I've ever heard. Tracks like Dumbest Girl Alive, Hollywood Baby, and $1 million play with themes of capitalism and celebrity culture in a bit of a mockery way that does not necessarily, however, exclude themselves from the phenomenon of these things. Sonically, this album honestly is quite leaps and bounds away from 1000 gecs. While the levels of irony that were present on 1000 gecs is absolutely still present here, it's probably more on this one. It's done sonically in very post-hyperpop ways. And in that I mean there's obviously some, or many, palimpsests of hyperpop on this record, but I also wouldn't necessarily call it a hyperpop project. Kind of like the Underscores album, it is a musical stew of genre and production and all of that. Just a really fun project by one of the most prolific duos in music we have as of current. At number 17, we have Weed Killer from Ashniko. Unlike 100 gecs with 10,000 gecs, Ashniko does kind of stay in her sonic comfort zone a little bit with this album, but it's done in a very sonically and thematically cohesive way to create an album that is not just a collection of songs, like you could argue her debut album was, or debut mixtape, but is absolutely a body of work. While I wouldn't necessarily call the tracks on this thing the most comforting music to listen to, even the lower points on this thing has something to say and absolutely captures your attention. For example, track 5 won it all. And as I mentioned in my top 30 songs of the year video, I really like that Ashniko finished the album on a softer note. This project absolutely showed that Ashniko is here to stay, and she's gonna keep fucking going, even if it means smashing you with her platform lace-up knee-high leather boots to get there. At number 16, we have The Good Witch for Maisie Peters. Maisie was also someone who came onto my radar this year, and I went through like a month phase where I was like really listening. I mean, when you combine that voice with her shameless, vulnerable, early 20s adolescent themes and lyricism, and her honestly experimental use of the indie rock pop genre, you actually end up with a very unique artist. Kind of like with Samia, you will not catch Maisie falling for sonic trends in the indie landscape. She's incredibly true to herself as a person and an artist in her music, and this album is a great representation of that. Not to mention, it's very cohesive in its sound and themes, and while it is absolutely a breakup album, she turns it into an album that is ultimately about her and her experience and growth than The Boy Who Broke Her Heart. This album has some of the best indie pop moments from the year. Run, which was in my top 30 songs list, Lost the Breakup, Wendy, Coming of Age, just to name a few. I think she proved that she does not just have potential through this album, she is just that indie rock pop girl. This is done through thematic and sonic optimism that is obviously very lacking these days, for good reason, so it's really honestly refreshing to just listen to any of her songs, but especially the tracks on this project. Like, even the sad songs on this album still have a layer of hope to them. And you could argue it could just be because of her age, but I have a feeling it's just the kind of person and artist she is, which is honestly very cool. Okay, at number 15, we have Calico from Ryan Beatty. This album was probably the biggest grower on me this year, as every time I listen to it, I get more and more obsessed with it. And I've come to the conclusion that that is down to Ryan's vocals, melodies, and Frank Ocean-esque production stylings on this thing. However, the lyrics on here have grown on me as well. Every song on this album has a moment on it that makes me feel like I have been punched in the guts and or am ascending to a higher yet more melancholic plane. This album manages to be existential yet also simple and subtle. For example, you have lines like on Hunter, and that's when I realized all this time I've been living in my head, compared to a lyric on Cinnamon Bread, Infinite Jest, and Cinnamon Bread. And then there's lyrics that rest somewhere in between, like You Were Right, Texas is hot at night, thank God for the wind, there's a storm in sight. This album is an instant classic for me, for sure. Or I guess not an instant classic, but it's now a classic. At number 14, we have Heaven Knows from Pink Panthers. This was obviously the last album I reviewed this year. I really enjoyed it. In some ways, I knew exactly what to expect from Pink Panthers' debut album, but also had no idea what to expect. And I'd say the album landed somewhere in between both of those things. The high moments on this album absolutely represent why she is one of the ones. But then honestly, even the like low points on the album honestly represent that she is more versatile than people give her credit for. And while the album is incredibly cohesive thematically, obviously, but also sonically, there's quite a lot of range on it. From the crispily groovy track 4, The Isle, to the second to last track, Capable of Love, that was the lead single for this project. That is honestly her most like dramatic sounding song yet. It crescendos in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think would happen on a Pink Panther song, but it works beautifully. And then of course you have Boy's a Liar feat Ice Spice, which you could argue is the Gen Z song of the year. And while sometimes I do need to look at the lyrics while listening to her music because she is British, I never get bored of love listening to her music. I don't think I ever will. She's honestly one of my faves in music right now. At number 13, we have Let's Start Here from Lil Yachty. This album, I believe, came out in like the first week of the year. And unlike Samia's album that came out in January of this year, that I thought would end up being overshadowed, I knew this album was gonna stay in the top 20 all year. I'm not gonna lie, this album absolutely does get redundant at times and potentially could have been cut down a little bit, but everything else about this project is eerily stunning. In many ways, it feels like Yachty was meant to make an album like this, because while it sounds crazy hearing Lil Yachty made a psychedelic rock album, you realize that he didn't really have to change much about his cadence or tone at all. It actually works kind of perfectly. While there are multiple collaborators on this album, Diana Gordon is the most obvious one, at least. I love how he utilized her on this project. You can tell they have great creative chemistry, and yeah, somehow this album was both one of the most surprising yet also satisfying releases of the year. At number 12, we have Good Riddance from Gracie Abrams. I also pretty much started listening to Gracie this year, or maybe like late last year. Her hushed, whispery vocals feel like a warm blanket on the soul, and while her lyricism wasn't always my favorite thing in the world on her past projects, she improved immensely on this one. This album is solely produced by Aaron Dessner. I think Gracie and Aaron are musical matches made in heaven. I mean, this album really proves that Gracie is making the best indie pop music right now. I mean, the opening track, Best, it soars in ways that I simply cannot explain in words. And then you have chiller tracks like Will You Cry or This Is What the Drugs Are For that really highlight Gracie's intentionality, not just in her lyricism, but in her performance. She's an incredibly vulnerable performer. Like, she is Gen Z white girl melancholia, and I fuck with it. To be honest, this album really surprised me. I was not expecting it to be this good. And I can't not mention Amelie as a gay girly. Like, where'd you go? Amelie, where'd you go? Or was it all in a dream? Amelie, tell me no? I met a girl once. Like, no man could ever and will ever understand the immaculate, immediate classic vibes of that song. And I'll say it, Amelie walked so Lacey could run. But I will get to that. At number 11, we have Javelin from Sufjan Stevens. Sufjan is one of the best we have. This album memorializes his late partner that I believe he was with for like 15 years or more. And with that being the thematic thread of the album, you would think it would sound a lot more dark, but it's actually one of the most like sunny and optimistic albums of the year, because as I said, it is an album memorializing his late partner. It's really not an album about grief. Of course, there are moments of grief on the album, naturally, but the album is not about Sufjan. The album is about his late partner, the love they shared, what it expresses and represents about the human experience, about existence, about life in general. And while Sufjan doesn't necessarily make any crazy experimental sonic shifts on this project, he really doesn't and didn't need to. Because Sufjan's sound is, in my opinion, one of the most timeless sounds in music. In fact, Sufjan will always be incredibly underrated to me. While yes, it is a project about something very specific to Sufjan in his life, he managed to turn it into a very universal sentiment of a body of work. Not only is that impressive, but I think it's also very selfless of him. At number 10, we have Sundial from Noname. This is Noname's first LP release since 2018. Noname is one of the most revolutionary voices in alternative hip-hop as of current, and that only continued on this project, to the point of even calling herself out in moments that represent kind of the idea of no ethical consumption under capitalism in a way. Like, in the world we live in, we are all guilty, and Noname does a really impressive job at expressing that on this track Namesake, where she also calls out artists like Beyonce and Kendrick, etc. But ultimately, it's not really down to the specific people. It's about the system, and Noname calls out that system in some of the most brutal yet incredibly poetic ways on this album. She's always been an A+ feature artist, and that does not stop on this record. She is honestly a gift to society. We do not appreciate her enough. We do not listen to her enough. And yeah, like, stream Noname. Like, that is all I can say. Coming in at number 9, we have Space Heavy from King Cruel. This is King Cruel's first release since 2020, I believe. And while I do not have synesthesia, or I think that's how you pronounce it, this album puts you into the world of colors that is the album cover. It's dark, but not necessarily in theme, but more like in atmosphere. The album, when you listen to it in order, takes you on a ride of difficult but necessary introspection, tearful sentiments, and honestly, like, apocalyptic softcore vibes. On his discography in the past, he has played with soft sonic landscapes, but they end up feeling quite heavy. For example, Lonely Blue off of his 2017 project, I believe. But the softer moments on this album are not heavy at all. They're actually quite light. And I talked about that a little bit in my top 30 songs video with C. Ford. It's nice to see that while he will always exist in his like sonic realm, there is still room and potential for him to grow within it. And yeah, this album is just a really worthwhile listen. At number 8, we have Fountain Baby from Amor. This album is so fucking good. The fusion of Afro beats, modern and old R&B, hip-hop, pop, grunge, metal. Like, this album is another musical stew, just Amor style. This entire album is sparkly, it's effervescent, it's bright, but it's also groovy and grounded and sultry. There is pain, there is joy, there is sex, there is loneliness, there's gay shit, and there's God. This album has it all, and it's all done through Amor staying incredibly true to her roots as an artist, as well as at the same time experimenting intensely, and it works every fucking time. Like on Sex, Violence, and Suicide, you will be shocked every time you listen to it where that song takes you. But then you have the grooviest, poppiest R&B track, Co-Star, track 2. It feels like it's miles away from Sex, Violence, and Suicide, but it is on the same album and it is cohesive. Like, do not play with Amor. The world is sleeping on her as well. She's incredibly underrated. Do yourself a favor and listen to this album. At number 7, we have Guts by Olivia Rodrigo. This was probably like the most anticipated sophomore project in the past few years, and she absolutely stepped up to the plate. And she's still very young. She is 20 years old. She wrote this album when she was 19, and I actually think it was incredibly smart of her to reference and relate to Sour on this project, because it really is just Sour little grown up. And I think it honestly would have been a mistake for her to like reinvent herself or anything. There's obviously always been a ton of pressure for pop girlies to have to reinvent themselves over and over again. I mean, look at Taylor. And I think Olivia definitely has the privilege of becoming a pop girly at this point in history, where she has the ability to kind of say, fuck that. This is me. I'm a singer-songwriter. Y'all are the ones that made me a pop star. I'm gonna stay true to who I am aesthetically as an artist. And it absolutely worked in her favor. While there are absolutely moments on this album where you're like, you are 19. Like Making the Bed, for example. There are moments on here that are very wise beyond her years. And I don't mean that in a punny way given the line on Teenage Dream, but there you go. Here's a pun for you. I mean, Lacey. When I first heard Lacey, I was like, this is so different for her. People obviously automatically compared it with Amelie by Gracie Abrams. And that's kind of why I said Amelie walked so Lacey could run. And that kind of brings me to the point that like people are always going to call out Olivia for copying or having lyrics or melodic moments or whatever that sound like something else. It's 2023. It's the apocalyptic future. She is a young pop star. You can't really make anything like new anymore unless you're like making an entire new genre like they did in 2020 with hyperpop. And in fact, I think it's really cool and smart to reference songs or artists or moments in pop culture that inspire you as an artist and a person. I mean, we're all made up of our experiences and our past. And when you're an all-American bitch, a lot of that is going to be things that the women before you have slayed. And I think every artist does this, and I think people love to shit on Olivia for it for absolutely no reason. I don't get it. And honestly, for the kind of music Olivia is making, grunge pop, it's impressive that more of it doesn't sound like other stuff. I have been an Olivia stan from the beginning, and I will always be, I think. I honestly think she's way more talented than people give her credit for. But what does give me hope in how Olivia rejects these patterns of women in pop music, she is paving the way for more and more authenticity in pop. And she's doing it through writing and just overall creating very timeless pop music. At number 6, we have Something to Give Each Other from Troye Sivan. This was also one of the most surprising releases of this year for me. I love Troye, but his music has never necessarily been what I love about him as like a pop culture figure, but that changed completely with this project. I think this is like definitely one of the best pop albums that was put out this year. The album is so cohesive, but past that, the era is just the aesthetics, the colors that you see in the videos and the album cover, but also the colors you hear in the music. The aesthetic of this album feels almost kind of stripped down. There's really not a lot of like extra shit going on. And I think without the weight of the pressure of kind of making something new and interesting, he ended up doing it by being himself. I mean, the two pop lead singles, Rush and Got Me Started, it's pop perfection. He slayed the sample usages on this album. Oh my god. Obviously on Got Me Started, but also with Can't Go Back Baby. And even the deep cuts on this thing just pull you the fuck in. Like the first few moments of What's the Time Where You Are, Tokyo just hit me like a wave. This album is sexy, it's groovy, it's synthy, but it's not overly bloated in the synthiness. It's vibey, it's heartfelt. I mean, it's every twink's wet dream. Even on the back end of this thing, tracks like Silly and Honey showcase that he is an album artist that still can be fucking played in the gay club. Yeah, overall, I'm just like very proud of him for this project. It's obviously one of my favorite projects of the year, and I can't wait to see where this all takes him. Okay, we are in the motherfucking top 5. At number 5, we have the rise and fall of a Midwest Princess from Chappell Roan. Honestly, my main takeaway from 2023 is Chappell Roan. I mean, in my opinion, this is probably one of the best debuts I've heard in a long time. What's interesting about the album title to me is that chronologically, the album does not necessarily go from like the rise and then the fall. Listening to this album in order is being tossed from the rise back to the fall and back to the rise and back to the fall. Like you go from After Midnight to Coffee, and then you go from Casual to Hot to Go. And while the back half of the album does have a bit more of those balletic sonic vibes, her spirit that is so present on the first half of the album is not missing, even though the songs are a bit like softer, I guess. She is the definition of timely and timeless to me because she is so 2020s, but she also makes so many references to so many different decades and the pop culture that came from it. Like in one song you hear Lady Gaga, but you also hear 80s synth pop. In one song you can hear 90s, early 2000s it girl behavior, while also hearing like club dance music from like 2015. And this all makes for an incredibly fresh sounding sound. She's unapologetically queer, which you absolutely should be able to be in today's times. I could go down the track list and talk about each song for like 10 minutes each, but I will spare you. Obviously, I talked about Red Wine Supernova in my top 30 songs list. Feminine Omenon. Make a bitch go on and on. It's a feminine omenon. Hot to Go. That pre-chorus, like, baby, do you like this beat? I made it so you'd sleep with me. Super graphic, ultra modern girl. You know what they say. Never waste a Friday night on a first date. No one is doing it like her. And My Kink is Karma. Guys. Oh my god. That song cries for me. People say I'm jealous, but my kink is watching you ruin your life. The places that chorus melodically and production-wise takes me, I can't put it into words. I simply can't. Yeah, this obviously ended up being one of my favorite releases of the year, and I would not be surprised if she makes her way into my top 5 like artists of 2024 because I can't stop listening. Speaking of gay people, at number 4, we have The Record from Boy Genius. I mean, I feel like there's nothing much for me to say that hasn't already been said about this album. An instant classic. All 3 of them very much equally shine on this project. I saw them live and it was honestly one of the best shows I've ever been to. I talked about it in my top 30 songs video about like how everything they stand for as a band, like the band name being Boy Genius, calls out the culture in all the best possible ways, and that's done in the music as well. Most obviously on songs like Satanist and like Leonard Cohen, but more subtly on songs like Letter to an Old Poet, which notably samples a track off of their 2018 EP in such a genius way that really represents like time in such a like it freaks me out in the best way. But even like Emily, I'm Sorry, which is just like literally a Phoebe Bridgers track. Like I'm 27 and I don't know who I am, but I know what I want. I mean, if that doesn't express mid-20s depression in the 2020s, I don't know what does. Then there's songs like True Blue and Anti-Curse that could have been written like honestly, in my opinion, like 30 years ago. The record, like the record of the year, except for the top 3. At number 3, we have Did You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard from Lana Del Rey. I mean, obviously one of my favorite albums of the year. A&W was my top song of the year, and I kind of talked about how that song is kind of like her magnum opus. But now that I think about it, honestly, this whole album feels like her magnum opus. Like on the last track, Taco Truck XVB, she really samples her own song, Venice Bitch, turning it into like a trap pop song somehow. And it's so kitschy and it works. It works. And she has songs like Fingertips and Kintsugi and Grandfather Please Stand on the Shoulders of My Father While He's Deep Sea Fishing, girl, that are so tragically beautifully about life and death and family and love. She has the like eerie interludes that are eerie and are confusing but somehow fit. You have the campy Lana Del Rey on Candy Necklaces. I'm obsessed with this. And track 3, Sweet. If you want some basic bitch, go to the Beverly Center and find her. And then you have a beautiful love song for a friend titled Margaret, i.e. Margaret Qualley, Jack Antonoff's now wife. And then, I mean, Peppers. When I first heard that song, I was shocked out of my boots. It is a song of maximalism. It says so much just in that itself. Like the way the song is crafted out of mostly a sampling of the Tommy Genesis song. But then at the end, she samples the Beach Boys. And it's just like the sonic definition of like overstimmy. And then like Fishtail Love. You wanted me sadder. She honestly like covers a lot of the genres that she has experimented with throughout her career on this album in a way that is still cohesive somehow. I love the casualness of a lot of the production. By casualness, I mean that a lot of these tracks don't necessarily feel polished, but in that, like, that's how they are polished. Like on Candy Necklaces, how there's almost like a little like, you've been acting pretty reckless. Like there's a lot of demo vibes on this album, but it makes for a vibe that is kind of like unmatched, not just in music, but in Lana's discography herself. I mean, she obviously proved herself with NFR, but she did it again here, and I'm glad she did, because she is incredibly misunderstood. People will always be misogynistic towards her, and the least she can do is get her flowers while she's alive. Her mom called. I told her, you're fucking up big time. So my top 2 albums are the only albums I gave 10s to this year. Number 2 being The Land is Inhospitable and So Are We from Mitski. Like, Mitski does folk on this album, and it's done perfectly. The lyricism and just general Mitski vibes that she brings on this project is one for the record books. I mean, this album is like Mitski in a cabin in the woods. Tell me something that's more #vibes, I dare you. Through her themes of like grief and loss on this album, she ends up making incredibly profound statements about life and existence and humanity and love. The instrumentation and production on this album feels quite like new for her, but it also feels like so natural for her, like duh. Yeah, I mean, this is just, it's a perfect album. It's a perfect album. Speaking of perfect albums, number 1, we have Desire I Want to Turn Into You from Caroline Polachek. Nobody's doing it like Caroline, no one will ever. Like, no one is weird enough. I feel like her as a pop artist is such a good representation of the times we are living in aesthetically. No one does vocals like Caroline. I mean, even like the first moments on Welcome to My Island, like those unhinged vocalizations, like, oh my god. The control she has of her voice is so impressive, and honestly I don't think she showed that off enough on 2019's Pang, so I'm glad she did on this project. This album is absolutely a body of work, but it covers so many different sonic landscapes, whether it's through the production, through the instrumentation, or through the crafting of the song itself. You have Welcome to My Island and Bunny as a Writer, which are the most like pop forward tracks. You have a song like Pretty Impossible, which was actively written without verses or choruses. You have Sunset, like the Spanish guitar, like hell yes. You have songs like Crude Drawing of an Angel and Hope Drunk Everlasting that are incredibly beautifully eerie. You have songs like I Believe and Fly to You that are windswept and like cathedral-like, but are actually grounded in very like modern production elements. And I mean, you can't talk about divine type shit without talking about Billions and the choir that carries you out of this incredibly deeply angelic album. Yeah, I mean, I'll be wrapping my head around this album for years, I think. And yeah, I mean, #1 album of the year. Like, it is what it is. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you to anyone who has watched my videos or subscribed to me this year. I am having so much fun doing this. I'm very excited for what 2024 brings in music, but until then, have a very safe and happy holidays, and I will see you in 2024. Bye!